Well, good evening. Welcome to Our Front. Tonight on Our Front, that particular story about the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana rejecting claims by the opposition that the Akufo-Addo government is contrary to its own promise, while in opposition, increasing electricity tariffs rather than reducing them. The Vice President has been raising the question, making many question why there is always politics over the increment of electricity tariffs in this country. But how does that leave Ghanaians? Tonight, the response from a man who's held the power situation before and has been in charge of it. I'll tell you about that man. But first, let's take a break. After the break, I'll let you on my guests and we talk about the politics of electricity tariff increases in this country. You welcome back. Now, the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana is actually charging hard at the opposition NDC. He's telling them that we did way better than you when it comes to electricity tariff increases. This comes on the heels of the recent 5% increase, which is causing a lot of discomfort to many Ghanaians. He's insisting that the NDC has no claim to make on the issue of electricity tariffs because they did far worse than the current government when it comes to that particular commodity, which has always been political in this country. Now, one man who's been minister for power before, indeed, Dr. Kwabena Donkor is my guest. Doc, you're welcome to Our Front.
Thank you.
I hope you are doing well this day.
Well, we're surviving.
So, in this entire state, one grouping that should never comment on electricity tariff increases and its impact on the people is the NDC. The Vice President believes that your track record is extremely terrible and it makes you not have any moral authority at all. Because indeed, comparatively, he thinks that your increase is way higher than they did in the over 100% according to the Vice President. This is cumulatively between 2014, 2016, 2012, 2016, over the period. In fact, he breaks it down. He said in 2010, it was 89%. 2011, it was 10%. 2013, it was 78%. 2014, it was 28%. 2015, it was 59%. And between 2013 and 2016, that's in the last 4 years of the NDC, cumulatively, we're talking about 166%. You cannot, and he insists, you cannot be the ones making claims and comparing to just 5% since the NPP came into power. What sayest thou?
Well, Dr. Bawumia, His Excellency, occupies a very high position of state. He's the Vice President of the Republic. And I wish he would have stayed out of this fray. I find it very uncomfortable to publicly challenge any assertion by either the president or the vice president, because the presidency represents the very institution of the Ghanaian state. Unfortunately, we have a vice president who decides to descend into areas that ministers and sub-ministerial level appointees are ordinarily best equipped to address.
Are you averse to the facts?
It's not about the facts. If you look at, you see, you can pick statistics. You can just pick any data and throw it about anyway. But the reality, the undergirding principle, if you look at the last 4 years of the NDC administration, if you look at the institutional reforms, the projects, the policies which were brought to bear on the situation, we had created such a platform to make increases very minimal if they have to be. Because, for example, if we take 2014, 2015, the bulk of our fuel was imported. It was either gas from Nigeria, which was reliably unreliable, and therefore we had to fire crude oil for our thermal plants. And in the latter stages, we brought in heavy fuel oil. As a result of policies pursued by the previous government and the government before it, we had a situation where today, the bulk of our fuel that powers our power plants is locally sourced. And gas has always been cheaper than crude oil. Gas has always been 30–40% cheaper than crude oil. Apart from the cost of fuel being cheaper, and mind you, the past regime worked hard to bring the ENI field, which is also a gas field. We now have 10, we have Jubilee, so we have enough domestic gas to cut down the cost of fuel. And the fuel cost is the largest single component in power generation. So if you've been able to cut down the cost of fuel by 30–40%, ordinarily, the cost of power should be coming down. Unfortunately, and fortunately on the other hand, unfortunately on one hand, and fortunately on the other hand, the MPP administration in 2016 realized that this country had gotten to a stage where our fuel source was secured domestically. And therefore, on the back of that, they could make the promises they made that we're going to reduce the cost of power. In the government, if the NDC had won the 2016 election, on the back of lower fuel cost, the cost of power would have gone down.
Just on the back of that.
If there is a 30% reduction in your cost of fuel, and fuel is the single largest cost item in generation, then you are in a position to reduce tariffs. And that was the essence of the government pushing for the ENI Sankofa field to be brought on stream in a fast-track manner because we needed the gas. Remember that originally, the ENI discoveries were gas discoveries. The crude came in when they were praising.
Yeah.
And therefore, the whole drive to bring that field to production was to come up with domestic gas, get enough domestic gas to reduce our generating costs and reduce our dependence on external fuel sources. So this is the backdrop.
Did the NDC say that the NPP was not in the position to reduce the tariffs when it came into power, when they made the promises in 2016?
Well, I never heard that.
Nobody in the NDC said that?
Well, I never heard that.
What did you call these promises lofty?
Look, they had a number of promises, and we said they are promises.
Okay.
A number of them were lofty. I never heard anybody in authority isolating one particular one. You remember the number of promises?
Yes, of course, a lot of them.
A lot of them, we said they were lofty.
Yeah.
In the general pool, they were lofty.
But you didn't say that crude oil-based and electricity prices were not going to go down because of this.
Look, when they had to, this year, at a point, when gas became unavailable as a result of some technical blip, and they had to bring in crude for a very short period, we entered into a period of unofficial load shedding. You were all here.
Yes, that's what we were told. But
yes.
So there was a very temporal period because of...
gas was not available because there was a problem.
Yeah.
So that shows how important gas in the supply chain is. So if we had to live with a diet of crude oil imports over a long period of time because domestic gas was not available.
Necessarily push up costs.
Absolutely.
And people were asked to pay higher price.
Absolutely.
And that was really out of not proper planning.
No, not, well, if you don't have domestic gas, if you don't have the discovery, how will planning reduce your cost?
Okay.
It is when you have the discovery, and then you move from discovery to production. Because
their argument is that, one, you did not only plan properly, you poorly managed the sector. So out of poor management, and because the NPP was in a position to better manage that particular sector, that is why it was going to be able to reduce the, electricity prices, which it did on the average of 70.5%. And you recall that particular reduction.
What happened with that reduction? On that reduction was a fulfillment of a whimsical manifesto pledge.
Yeah.
And I say that because, for example...
You say it's whimsical.
It's whimsical.
But you're saying that they had basis to reduce it.
Excuse me. I'm saying that particular reduction was whimsical because on the back of that reduction, an entity like Gridco had to suspend 90% of their capital projects because of inadequate cash flow. And when we live in a country where our power infrastructure had decayed as a result of underinvestment over a long period of time, and then you come to exacerbate the underinvestment because you have to score a political point, then you are thinking short term. You're not thinking of the national interest.
But sorry, are you saying that the party that promised and delivered on its promise, actual delivery on the promise was whimsical? How can you make that clear?
Look, how do you reduce price and then suddenly, in less than a year, you have to increase price? Couldn't you have stayed the price to cushion off the effect for a longer period?
So the party chose the fulfillment of its campaign promise.
A campaign promise that is whimsical. A campaign promise that, let me explain this properly.
Yeah.
If you take Gridco, you take ECG, you take VRA, these are all national corporations, national commercial entities.
Yeah.
The sole shareholder is the Ghanaian state. If you reduce the revenue flow to the extent that it impacts on their budget, to the extent that they suspend capital expenditure, if you cut your tongue to eat it, you haven't eaten any meat. If the Ghanaian state, ideally, the Ghanaian state being the sole shareholder, ought to have recapitalized
these various institutions.
These institutions.
Gridco,
inject more
VRA,
capital.
and all of them.
Yes, inject more capital. You are not in a position to inject the capital, and yet you are reducing legitimate flows. You see, what I think the power sector we need to concentrate on a non-partisan basis is improving efficiency. We can have efficiency gains.
Yeah. And that may result in reductions.
That can result in reductions through efficiency gains. Unfortunately, we are too short-term because we are looking at 4-year electoral cycles to the disadvantage of long-term sustainable growth. For example, over the last 3 years of this administration, if you take power penetration, accessibility, 3 years we've not moved 3 percentage points because
as in more people are not getting access to power.
Yes. We've not moved 3 percentage points. We had a target that by 2020, Ghana will reach universal access for electricity.
Even for those who cannot pay.
You see, access is the power being available, not necessarily you uptaking.
Okay.
If there is power in this room or in this community and you decide that you will not use power, you cannot be forced.
I get you.
But yeah, so accessibility, we said 2020. Because at the time we were leaving office, we were already at 83. And universal accessibility is defined as 90% or more.
I see. So
today they've shifted it to 2030.
It's been pushed 10 years.
Yes, because we are investing. If you want to develop this country, you cannot develop this country without adequate, sustainable, reliable power.
Could the NDC have reduced electricity tariffs in 2016? You said that the gas element had been and the fuel element had been taken care of.
Remember, Sankofa came online till end of 2016, but fully in 2017. If NDC had won the 2016 election, we were in a position to reduce the cost of generation.
I see.
Yes. On the back of gas.
So any political party that came in 2017 was in the position to reduce
the cost of generation. What you would do with that reduction? Do you use the savings for consumption, or you invest the savings in expanding infrastructure? That is a decision
governments make.
Governments have to make.
Okay. That's interesting to know. Now, let me get this part clarified completely. because the accusation is that the NDC, mindful of what this government is doing, and you say that the proper systems were put in place.
Yes.
So this government is reaping the benefits of an established system.
Precisely.
But this government has also complained about not only power purchasing agreements, there's also complained about several of them. They said that's cancelled, others said was incurring huge debt on the back of that.
We challenged the government Energy Commission to list any power purchase agreement they had cancelled.
You don't think any has happened?
We challenged them. Look, ECG came before the Mines and Energy Committee. We asked them, have you cancelled any power purchase agreements? No, they haven't.
ECG said they are not.
They hadn't. You see, the process of signing power purchase agreement is a very laborious process. If you are in the middle or at the beginning of some negotiation and you hold that negotiation, you have not cancelled a contract.
I see.
Because there's no contract to have been cancelled. Every single agreement I brought to Parliament for ratification that was ratified, except one, that the government of Ghana is in arbitration with the investors before being approved. Indeed, if you take CalPower,
okay,
or if you take the AXA plant, we signed for 5 years with the expectation that newer, more efficient plants were in the pipeline. And therefore, these were just holding plants to hold the situation until the newer ones come in. This government has extended those plants, the duration from 5 to 10 years. AXA, CalPower, and even Ameri. There was an intent to extend the Ameri contract to 15 years or so. It took the vociferous rejection of Parliament, led by the minority, to hold that deal. And therefore,
which led to the removal of the minister substantive then?
Which led to the minister leaving office.
Ah, okay. So you don't accept removal?
Well, I wouldn't know the inner intricacies. So
I get you. No problem. I'm not disputing that.
Yeah, leaving office. And therefore, if they turn around there, on one hand, to want to extend contracts, and then the other hand say we have oversigned, there is a contradiction. And that contradiction is borne out by the fact that the national interest is hardly the domineering factor. People are looking at vested interest. We looked at the national interest. For example, we have been accused of SS having contracted SS power.
Yes.
As we speak.
One that is costing us huge amount of money every single time.
As we speak, Valco is operating on under 2 port lines, 1.17, 1.8 port lines. 3 port lines are idle. And in our plan, Valco should be at full stream by now.
Okay.
Each port line takes 75 megawatts. Again, if you look at plants like TAPCO, if you look at the Siemens plant in Tema, the mines reserve plants, they are at the end of their useful life. They have to be more bought now. So they sit on the books. Effectively, they are passed by their sell-by date. So the technical intricacies are there. Unfortunately, we decide to play politics, partisan politics, not even national politics. I'm all for national politics. That leads to nation building. But when we decide to nitpick for partisan advantages, then we have a problem.
Now, so are you saying that as of the end of 2016, ECG had not signed 14 power purchasing agreements, which were operational with combined capacity of 1,104 megawatts? Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that at the end of 2016, ECG had not signed a number of these agreements.
How about the 18 other PPAs signed by ECG with a combined capacity of 6,008 PPAs under discussion with total capacity of 2,116?
That's a mirage.
This is from the Energy Ministry.
it's a mirage. We have challenged them to produce the contracts they have cancelled. You see, look, I'm in negotiation with you, and then I come and say, look, okay, the negotiation, we want to end the negotiation. Have you cancelled the contract?
Not yet.
Not yet, because there's no contract in place.
In the first place, yeah.
And in another case, ECG on its own does not have the power to sign a contract, because every single power contract demands a government guarantee in one way or the other as risk management. And it then has to go to cabinet for cabinet approval, has to come to parliament for parliamentary ratification. If you don't go through those processes, you do not have a contract.
I get you. I mean, the finalized thought was that 8 of the power petition agreements with combined capacity of 2,070 are to proceed without modification. 4 were the ones with a combined capacity of 1,810 to be deferred to 2018 and 2025. Now 3 with a combined capacity of 1,150 to be deferred beyond 2025, and 11 of them with a capacity of 2,800 to be terminated.
Did they name them?
None were mentioned specifically.
Precisely because there were no valid contracts. For example,
okay, so you're saying that they didn't cancel contract. They just said that we are not continuing a conversation with you.
Precisely.
With no cost involved.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, if you don't have a contract, there can't be a cost. Because no contract had been signed.
So technically, there were no agreements in the first place.
No. And that is why when we challenge them, name them. Which ones have you cancelled?
I've not seen a list yet on that.
Precisely. We've challenged them in Parliament, on the floor of Parliament. We've challenged them at the Energy Committee meeting. And they have not produced that list. ECG came before us, and contracts cancelled was 0.
That's what ECG brought to you?
Yes.
But perhaps ECG was not in fullest appreciation of the contracts in this case. Or perhaps some message has been left out in their definitive information to you. Because
you see, what
this
do you
is
call
one
a
of
contract?
The,
what do you call a contract? You see, do you call preparatory work a contract?
Not necessarily.
Precisely, that is the issue. You see, when politically, for political advantage, we dress up a puppy as a full-grown dog, we have a problem.
In this case, we purport that mere conversations are contracts. And that they've been cancelled just when they were just conversations which has commenced.
Precisely.
But the conversations never had any liability to the state.
No, because
we're not losing the 50 million or more.
They never even got to the ministry, let alone go to cabinet. I challenge them, which contract that went to cabinet, had cabinet approval, came to parliament for ratification, has been cancelled? None. And as minister, until the ECG brings me a draft that we are negotiating with these people, we need government input, we're going to need a government support, we're going to need a government guarantee or some other form. I, as the minister, cannot even do that. I have to take it to cabinet for cabinet to approve my proposal. And then that does not even constitute a contract yet, because by Ghanaian law, all side contracts should be ratified by parliament.
Yeah, which is true.
We haven't done that.
Now, so how come this conversation became this popular? And
because the media, excuse my language, was not critical. We challenged the ministry, we challenged government that produce those contracts that we have cancelled.
And yet that did not come up.
No, as we speak.
So now, are you defending all of the contracts that were signed prior to 2017?
That were signed, ratified, yes, I defend them because there was a plan. A plan was to bring in tricycle plans to bring in combined cycle plants, to bring in and phase out some of the dual, the non-combined cycle plants, which were far more expensive and come to the end of their useful life. There was a plan. And mind you, we want to aggressively develop. There is a certain misunderstanding. It takes a minimum of 3 years to bring a power plant from final investment decision to generation. It
like a Mary or like
3
Kappa.
years. Yes, it takes for a proper power plant. A Mary, these were emergency plants. A regular plan, it takes a minimum 3 years from FID, final investment decision, through the construction phase, etc. Okay. Our president, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, is all over the world drumming up investments. Which company will come to Ghana and say, look, I want to come and establish a plant, but I'll wait 3 years for you to have power
before you
come? So power must be available.
I see.
If all the power you have is to meet only your immediate needs, then you have a challenge in bringing up further investments, because the power must be available. The unutilized power, which is the attraction, the magnet for investment, yes, has to be paid for. Somebody must pay for it. And it's the Ghanaian state that wants to develop. So we must come out with a formula to pay for that power, which is the magnet for investment. We are competing for investment in the sub-region. Côte d'Ivoire has power. A factory wants to set up. They are considering Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. You say, look, I don't have power. In 3 years, I'll have power. Come on. Are we serious?
So you're basically saying that we agree to bring in these plants and the terms and conditions not very favorable to us?
No. What I'm saying is that there is the need to have some excess capacity. Yeah.
Not beyond the 10% on average, what they call it, increase that we have our capacity growing by.
No. There is, because we are all over the world touting for investment. Look, if you had put Valco to full production, that alone, we're talking about around 200 megawatts. In fact, more than 200 megawatts, about 225. On just that plant, bringing that plant alone. And that was one of our plans. Just that plant.
I see.
Don't also forget, we are quite dependent on hydro. Because of the wise decisions we took, by pushing a lot of the load on thermal, we allowed the Akosombo reservoir to build up. To the extent that we can now do 800-900 megawatts on Akosombo if we want to. Remember also that the generation mix has changed. Until the early 1990s, all of our power generation was hydro, legacy hydro. Akosombo generates at about 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The average thermal plant is about 12 to 13 cents per kilowatt hour.
More expensive.
Precisely. So as your uptake of power increases, and you have also exhausted all your major source of hydro, the complementation is going to be power, thermal. And therefore, the average cost, if we take the generation mix, the power will go up.
I get you.
And so we should also be investing in efficiency, in conservatism, and those other measures. That would have been the next phase. Because we are coming from a position of deficit. If you come from a position of deficit, you first of all cover that deficit
before
with a reserve margin. And then you go into the internal economies to improve internal efficiency.
Okay.
For example, we have such a high technical and commercial losses in our distribution. Apart from the theft, which is a subcomponent of commercial losses, there is the major cause is underinvestment. Today, we have smart meters, we have smart transformers, we have smart cables. Look, if you have a smart transformer, that transformer becomes an accounting unit. That transformer covers an area. Between the revenue received from that area and the power that goes in, using smart transformers, you can see where loopholes are coming. Those are the investments we ought to be making now. And those investments will need capital injection.
Which is what you say was stopped to
Precisely.
try and make sure that we get a reduction in power tariffs, the 70.5% for domestic consumers and also the almost 30% for the commercial consumers.
Yeah. Yes. Again, on our plan, in this country, for very historical reasons, industry had paid for too much for power compared to domestic. In most jurisdictions, it costs more. Domestic consumption costs more than industry.
Okay.
And that arises out of purely technical economics.
That more production means...
If you drop the cost of dropping 1 megawatt of power here compared to the cost of dropping 1 megawatt over 50 villages or 60 villages, the cost is not the same.
I see.
Yeah, you drop in at just 1 point and therefore the cost is lower.
Okay.
And that is why generally power to industry is cheaper because the deliverable cost is lower.
I see. Now, that may justify why 30% would have been a good way of reducing it.
No, it's always been, we had discussions with the Association of Ghana Industries. And it was an acknowledgement that the cost of power to Ghanaian industry was rather on the high side, whereas consumption was on the lower side. And so we needed to realign the balance. But mind you, ours is still a young nation state. And therefore, national security and national stability is also important. And therefore, you don't just reverse suddenly. You have to have a mechanism that ensures national stability, that ensures that the fragile nation state holds.
You have not disputed the 166% increase Dr. Bawumia says happened between the time of 2012 and 2016. You've not disputed one bit of it.
Look, you see, that's what I'm saying. You can pick figures.
They are factual, right?
Yeah. What was responsible for the increase? If you are firing your thermal plants on crude, light crude.
Doc, I want you to agree that these are factual figures.
No, these are figures he has produced. I can produce alternate figures.
Really?
Yeah. If you discount crude.
Oh, no, but why would you discount that? Take your time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
why would you discount that?
If you discount fuel price, because fuel is what we call pass-through.
Give me a second. I'm saying that when the PURC on all of these occasions increased or decided to deal with tariff increments, they did amount to the 166%. That's the question I'm asking. It's not the intricacies of what contributed to it. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking on the face of it, are these genuine figures from the PURC?
Well, he has quoted them. I don't know the basis of his calculation.
You don't think they're from the PURC? Because they are the ones who determine tariff for us in this country.
Do they always determine tariff?
At least for a very foreseeable time.
No.
Since we did deregulation.
Look, if you take the 2018 budget,
yes,
the budget statement stated that government was going to reduce tariff.
And the PURC effectively acted later on.
Yeah, so don't tell me PURC determined
but PURC later on announced it. The announcement was from the PURC.
Is that the business of government to determine tariff?
Oh, government said they made proposals.
By law.
No, of course. It's the PURC's work.
Precisely.
Yes.
So let's not hide behind the screen and say it's PURC. It's government.
Okay.
At least this government has shown with evidence that they determine what price PURC should announce.
Or they suggest to PURC.
They determine.
I said, okay,
because even with the current price adjustment, what were the reasons assigned by PURC?
Oh, a lot of them.
Inflation. Meanwhile, Ghana Statistical Services inflation has gone down.
In fact, for a very long time, for so many months, it's been on the decline.
Yes.
But it's a rate of change. It doesn't mean
listen.
But you understand this.
Listen. No.
They say that inflation is on the decline doesn't mean there's no inflation at all.
No. The reasons they are signed.
Let me list them because they are here. It said the following factors were considered in computing the automatic adjustment formula. 1, Ghana cedi US dollar exchange rate. 2, inflation. 3, price of crude oil and natural gas. 4, fuel mix, crude oil, natural gas, and distillate fuel. 5, generation mix, hydrothermal. 6, power purchase cost. And 7, demand forecast. The last one is electricity cost.
Listen, power purchase cost. Did the government not inform us that they had reduced through effective negotiation?
Yeah.
Power purchase cost.
Yeah.
So why should that become a factor for increasing?
It doesn't depend on the weight.
If you have reduced,
yes,
that is one. If you're looking at we are being told the CD has appreciated against the dollar. Check Bank of Ghana.
I mean, we know that over the period, we know that the rate of depreciation is not.
No,
yes,
no, that has appreciated. Look,
in slight isolated cases, but we know overall the POS have not been appreciated.
No, that's what they have said. The city has appreciated. Look, remember, this goes also to PDS. Yeah. Remember, one of the conditions President that the Ghanaian state ought to have met was to the PURC tariff review formula. Yeah. The government of Ghana could not meet that condition, and therefore the Minister of Finance had to write to PDS that the state would step in if there was any shortfall. Yeah. Look, so this whole adjustment, and that we must implement the automatic adjustment formula. We have committed to, and if we don't, we bear the cost. I get you. So, come what may, we had to go through the semblance of implementing the automatic adjustment cost. For a second, the political economy of that.
I'll come to you on that. But I've just gone to the summary of economic and financial data from the Bank of Ghana, the September 2019 review there, and it talks about nominal bilateral exchange rates. It takes the dollar, the pound, and the euro. I'll stay with the dollar predominantly. And it talks about, as of September 20, of course, as of August 2018, the rate of depreciation was 6.53, not appreciation, depreciation. Fast forward to September 2018, rate of depreciation 2018. Now I'm taking the 2 months, now I'll come to the last 2 months. The rate of depreciation was 7.57. Now when you come to August 2019, it was 8.74 depreciation. And again, August 2019, September 2019, it was 9.22. So clearly there is every single evidence suggests that we've been having depreciation all through. All negative figures, really.
Is it not the same government that tells us the CD has appreciated?
They said it was making gains.
So when you say the CD is making gains, is that not a contradiction?
But the Bank of Ghana data is clearly...
no, is that not a contradiction?
It might look like.
Yeah, when you tell us, when you sell misinformation, that's... And if governments are to be trustworthy, we hold on to what we've said. If the city has appreciated or is making gains, if that is the euphemism, then why should that impact negatively? You see, I don't have a problem with PURC. Look, as a country, my biggest worry as a person is the partisan politics we play with the power sector.
We would go into that after this break. Well, folks, we're still talking about the data and the specifics on the recent electricity tariff increase and the comments of the Vice President after that. Beyond the politics, what's the reality on the ground? And what are the main factors accounting for the current situation we find ourselves? After the break, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, who is the former Power Minister, will continue with us on this conversation. You welcome back to our front. My name is Raymond Darkwa. Tonight, our conversation is to get the response from those who've been in the ministry before to the Vice President's talk on specifically what has happened when it comes to electricity power tariff hikes in the country. The Vice President says since the NDC was in power from around 2012, 2016, and if you like, 2014, 2016, that period has seen over 166% increase cumulatively in electricity tariff compared to the rather low 5% that has happened under the NPP. So if any grouping at all is qualified to make commentary on this matter, it shouldn't be the opposition NDC. But Dr. Kwame has been in the Power Ministry. He's taken us through why it was possible for some reduction to happen under this government in the early stages, and what the NDC did prior to leaving office in the first place. What we've also had happening in this conversation is a historical account of why we are where we are today and what we can do going forward. Doc, we're having a conversation on the factors that has been cited by the PULC for the current increase in the electricity tariff. We talked about the Ghana cedi dollar exchange rate. We talked about inflation, which is where the sticky point was, because really, as we are told, it is trending downwards, as the evidence suggests, because we know that getting to the end of year 2016 December, it was 15.4. The month of August had inflation of 7.8%. So how is it possible that when we are having such almost half the figure actually, we still are posting that as a reason why we should increase the tariffs on electricity?
You see, for me, the real issue, and again, His Excellency the Vice President has not been in the energy business, and therefore I excuse some of the comments he makes. If you take the period before 2012, our generation mix, the real issue is the change in generation mix. Increasingly, thermal is becoming a major component.
A huge component.
Yes.
At least the Energy Commission says it's taken about more than 60% so far.
Increasingly, thermal is becoming, and thermal is about 3-4 times, minimum 3 times more expensive than our legacy hydro.
Okay.
Bui is expensive hydro. Bui generates at about 11 cents per kilowatt hour.
I see.
And that is because it's only a topping plant, really. Again, Pong has a headline capacity of 160 megawatts. Bui has a headline capacity of 400 megawatts. But in terms of gigawatt hours, Pong is bigger than the 400. Again, that is technical. Because you cannot operate Bui 24 hours.
Yeah,
and
as
expect,
told. Yeah.
You can do Pong 24 hours. So Bui is a peaking plant.
Okay.
Pong is base load. And so the real issue is the increasing thermal component of the generation mix. And that is why we should be worried about getting our thermal plants to be more efficient so that we can reduce costs, at the minimum contain cost. Because we have exhausted our major hydro resources. And as the economy expands, we're going to have more thermal generation. Yes, we can work on renewable, but the renewables have their limits. Variability. Look, there's a BXC farm around Mankisim when I was power minister, producing 20 megawatts of solar. We were on a visit to the farm and there was a cloud cover. It dropped from 18 to 3.
Oh, I see.
In about
just
5
because
minutes.
of the cloud?
Yes.
Because there was no sun.
Precisely.
Supply of solar power.
You also must have some reserve somewhere to take over. That is the challenge of renewables until battery technology develops to the extent that it becomes economic.
Okay, I get your point. And now, one of the points I want to raise, I get you basically saying that this should not be politicized.
Precisely. We should not nitpick. Because there are real fundamental issues that the whole of Ghana should be concerned.
But you have not, finally, you don't have any problem with what the Vice President said, do you?
I do. One, he was bringing the office of the Vice President into disrepute. If you descend to the level of operatives, operatives are forced to respond to you. And for me, that is against my style.
Okay.
The President and the Vice President represent our sovereignty.
Okay.
And therefore, that office must be accorded a certain
But you also say that he probably has not been in the energy sector.
Precisely. Because if he had been in the energy sector, he would have known that what has propelled a possible cost saving is the work that was done by the previous government in bringing domestic gas to production.
I see.
But for the domestic gas, if we're still using crude oil, and we saw an example, when domestic gas was not available for 3 weeks, we saw the hiccups in the power sector. So if we're using crude oil with an expanding economy.
But you want to believe that he has been briefed on these matters?
Oh, presidents are briefed, but they are often misbriefed. We've heard a number of instances, presidents have been misled. We've heard a number of those excuses. So, and I want to believe that they've been truly misled. I want to believe that. So briefing, depending on, if you have 3 technical people explaining a situation, you must have the 3 various positions to determine which position is consistent, because you can have 3 different positions.
Okay, I get you. Now, I'm wrapping up on this conversation. Should we expect more increases in what they call electricity?
Well, depending on the trajectory that government takes. If we place emphasis on conservation, we place emphasis on efficiency gains, we can contain the current prices. And should the CD, again, the CD is a critical component. 70% of the payables, 70 to 80% of the payables in the power sector are dollar denominated.
Okay.
The receivables are CD denominated. So any instability of the CD vis-a-vis the dollar creates its own apprehensions.
But doesn't look like our exchange rate is getting any better from the data I just showed you.
Well, the government is telling us the CD is making gains.
It's interesting. Now, let me come to this other point. Should we expect load shedding?
I'll be very surprised if we have load shedding. If we have load shedding today, it will be as a result of total mismanagement. Because on one hand, they say we have excess generating capacity. So if we have excess generating capacity.
But fuel might be a problem.
Well, as long as we have domestic fuel, if they have to fire crude like we have had to before we had sufficient domestic fuel, yes, that will be a problem.
Now, there's a question that is at the core of all of these. It's not the micro. It's who is managing our power sector, and especially at the tail end of it, distribution. The status of power distribution services. You in Parliament, have you been told whether or not they are being moved from suspension to cancellation or restored to manage the sector the way they were brought in to do in the first place?
The PDS debacle is our eternal national shame. It's a good example of how not to handle things.
How?
We have the sector minister boldly coming now to categorically state that there was fraud. We have a government saying we are investigating the allegation of fraud. We have a consultant commissioned by MEDA, which is the statutory body responsible, coming to say there were no breaches, however, there's no guarantee in place. We have a government delegation report also confirming that there is no guarantee in place. The guarantee is a condition precedent. It means we have handed over our national asset to a private entity of questionable character without even the security of a guarantee. And that's why it's an example of how not to manage things. Were we in a rush? Did we not have the technical capability of finding out whether a guarantee is where the paper is written on?
There are some indications that Meralco is saying the suspension has been made permanent. Have you heard this in Parliament?
I have. I know Meralco, PDS is still managing the system because, you see, again, part of the confusion that ECG take over, but there are contractual and other obligations. For example, all the staff of ECG are except
PDS. Yeah, except the top brass.
Yes, at PDS. So you cannot again change their status suddenly from PDS back to ECG without a process. And so ECG had to quietly hand over operations back to PDS. So PDS is running the system without a guarantee.
What does that mean?
It means we messed up big time as a nation.
How do we fix that?
We have two options. We go ahead and terminate and hand over operations back to ECG, or we retender, in the interim, give PDS or ECG a short contract, retender, get through a more transparent process. That is, if we still want the private sector participation. If I had my own way, let's terminate.
Let's terminate?
Let's terminate. Let ECG.
After all the FTI, all the other reports?
Because right now we look stupid as a nation that we've handed an asset estimated between $2 to $3 billion to an entity without even a guarantee.
But there's a risk of the middle cash.
How much is the middle cash?
500 million almost.
Half of it has already been spent.
Yeah.
So what is left?
So we should continue and terminate.
Precisely. And
why is Parliament not demanding that government act immediately?
Well, Parliament is technically on recess.
Yeah, but we know that you have come back from recess to deal with important national issues.
Unfortunately, the minority cannot recall Parliament.
Yes.
It's the majority that can recall Parliament.
I get you. So what do you want Parliament to do now? Should you wait till it is recalled?
Well, it can't win it until it is recalled. I personally think let's terminate.
I see.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a mess. It will become a good case study in any management school as to how not to manage a process.
Okay, now finally, and I need to wrap up on this particular question because we don't have so much time left on our hands. If government decides to continue with PDS, what would that mean?
It will mean we don't believe in processes and procedures. It will mean common sense has become a victim.
Have you seen the PDS statement that said that they have improved the sector, that they have reduced the debt? They've actually improved the, what used to be a low shedding period, and the rate of outages have also improved.
Was there low shedding before they took over? No, the load shedding happened whilst they were in charge. So they couldn't have reduced load shedding.
Actually, the outages have reduced.
Some investment has gone in. No, but before PDS.
Okay.
Those investments were meant to reduce those outages.
Okay. I guess we can leave here. Dr. Kalolokwa, I appreciate your time coming to our studios here today, and thank you so much for joining us.
The pleasure is mine.
All right, folks, that's where we end today's edition of Upfront. Many thanks to you for joining us on this day's edition, and we wish you all the best.